How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for checking out another video today at NXTgenMD. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name's Gianluca and the countdown is on, baby. In like 1 week, I'm going to be starting my first year of medical school at McMaster University, and I am so excited. Now, what we're going to be doing at this channel for the most part is we talk about fitness, we talk about medical school, lifestyle, admissions, and all of that stuff. So if you want to stick around for any of this content, please feel free to subscribe. Now, today though, we're going to be talking about the CASPer test and pretty much everything that you're going to need to know about the test in order to do well. What I want to do is create one of the largest freely available resources for everyone out there so they can see all this information in one area. Now, obviously, as we go through, there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're talking about today. So always go ahead and check the description below for timestamps so that you can skip ahead to whatever parts of the video you're most interested in. Now, the CASPer test is going to be a 90-minute test that you're going to have to take every single year that you apply to one of the programs that you're interested in. Now, it was first developed in 2010 by some researchers at McMaster University, and it's been used by their medical school every year in order to evaluate some of the soft skills regarding their candidates, right? Things that you can't really ascertain from the GPA or the MCAT. The CASPer test is going to be a 12-section test that you're going to have to write. And in these 12 sections, for each section, you're going to have 3 questions that you're going to have to answer in 5 minutes. So you're allowed 5 minutes per section before it just automatically sends you to the next section. Now, the first thing that we need to talk about is why do these schools like using the CASPer test? Because every year we're seeing that more and more schools are starting to use the CASPer test for their programs. It started off originally in Canada, and now it's moved down to different schools in the United States and Australia and other places as well. Now, the 10 qualities according to CASPer that they're going to be evaluating in candidates are ability to collaborate, communication, empathy, equity, ethics, motivation, problem solving, professionalism, resilience, and self-awareness. Now, it's my belief that schools like using some sort of metric for evaluating these soft skills because for a lot of professional programs, we're going to see that these are very important skills for the applicants to have. Now, you may have some mixed feelings about the CASPer exam, and that's totally understandable. I could relate with you 100%. But one of the things that I do like the best about CASPer is that they say that each section for your own test is going to be marked by a different evaluator. Now, in that way, it's going to try and reduce the bias that evaluators could have while they're marking as much as possible, and therefore hopefully give the schools an accurate representation of who the candidates are. Now, is the system foolproof? Of course not. Hardly any test out there really is foolproof. However, you shouldn't really be too focused about the actual metrics and the data behind the test, but more so that schools are using it and that it's very important for your application. I can't stress this enough. There are 3 different ways that schools could go ahead and use your CASPer test. Now, some schools are going to follow kind of like an impressionistic standpoint where the applicants will write the test and then CASPer will submit their scores to the school, and that way the schools will be able to develop some first impressions about the applicants that they were already had their eye on, you know? And then also if the applicant had a lower score on the GPA and MCAT part of their application, and now they have this really high CASPer score, the schools are going to be able to take a little bit more notice about them. Now, the second way that they could go ahead and use your CASPer score is something more along the lines of a hard cutoff, where they'll have their regular application process, admission process, and then they also have a cutoff score for CASPer in place, where if students don't get above this cutoff score, then their application will no longer progress through their admissions process. And now for the final way that these schools could use your score is something kind of like how what we did at McMaster, where the CASPer score for us was actually worth 1/3 of our entire pre-interview score. Like, that's 32%, because there's also bonuses for master's degrees and PhDs that they would throw in. But 32% of our application was based off of this 90-minute test. Now you're probably thinking, oh, okay, that's not that bad. But then when you look at it the other way, my GPA, which took me 4 years to accumulate, was also worth 32%. So this holds a lot of weight, this test. Do not take it lightly if you're in a situation like that. Now, for me, when I was looking at that breakdown, it was like an all or nothing for me, right? Some of you might be in the same situation as me, where this test is going to determine whether or not you get an interview this year. Now, for that reason, I think you're doing a great thing by starting well in advance. I'm going to say this right now. You are probably looking at around 1 to a month and a half in terms of prep for the test. Now, in terms of the scoring for the CASPer test, once again, we're going to see that CASPer says that each of your 12 sections are going to be evaluated by a separate evaluator. And they're going to give you an actual numeric score for the entire test, but you're never going to get it back. They're going to send that directly to the schools, so unfortunately, you're never really going to know how you did on this test. Each of the evaluators, before they go ahead and start marking, have to go through a training type of course, I guess, with CASPer first. And every question that they're going to be marking for that section, they're going to go ahead and be looking at specific things that CASPer is also going to tell them to look for. So again, keep in mind those 10 attributes. For each question that you answer, your score is going to be based in relation to how you met the attributes that that particular question was asking for. Now, another great thing about the CASPer test is that, thankfully, spelling mistakes and incomplete sentences do not really have that much of an effect on your score, and that's straight from CASPer. That's what they say. Now, in my own personal experiences, when I wrote the test last year for that application cycle, I remember I was on question 2 or 3, something like that, very early on, and I was just proofreading with the last 10 seconds that I had for one of my questions, and I looked up, and I had spelled apparently with a 7, okay? There was a number in there, and I saw that, and right at the time it switched me to the next question, and I thought it was game over, but obviously that's not the case. Now, on the other hand, you don't want to riddle your thing full of spelling mistakes. You always want to be as consistent as possible, but if you have a few that get by through you weren't able to catch them, the CASPer evaluators are going to go ahead and hopefully forgive this according to CASPer. Now, on that note, let's go ahead and start talking about the typing speed, your word per minute count, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to the CASPer test. Now, because CASPer is designed in such a way that it's a very, very short amount of time per scenario, you got to type as fast as you can to get all of this information from here down into the page, the online thing, so that the evaluators could see what it is that you were thinking. Now, when I was prepping for the test, I went on some forums and I was seeing what some of my competition was doing in terms of their word per minute count, and people were giving some ridiculous numbers. They were doing 80 words per minute, 90 words per minute. And meanwhile, I sat there and I was like, I'm screwed, because I was handwriting my notes throughout all of undergrad, and my word per minute count as of last year was around 52 words per minute, right? And that's not the best, but when you think that a professional typist has a word per minute count of between 65 and 75, some of the higher estimates are about 80 words per minute. Personally, I think with a word per minute count of about 52, you should be fine. I had no problems with answering all of my questions, but that's also because I was able to think very, very quickly because I had done so much prep. So I'm going to go ahead and link a word per minute kind of test, calculator, whatever you want to call it, also in the description. If you want to go ahead and take that test and see where you stand in relation to myself or in relation to a professional typist, go ahead and do that. Now, I will say that if you are finding difficulties in typing quickly, or at least relatively quickly, you should definitely go ahead and start working on this now, right? If you're going to be writing later on in the fall, around September, October, whatever it is, I would recommend that you start typing right now, every night before you go to sleep, or whenever you could find some free time, just whatever comes to your head. I would go ahead, and one of the things that I did was that I gave myself a category, right, about things that I already knew. So let's say, for example, that day I had gone ahead and taught a first aid course, right, because I worked as a first aid examiner. I would go and sit down and I would see how much I could type about each of the first aid things that I had taught that day, right? Now, that's because it was already on my mind, and it was something that would give me an example of something that would be really, really easy to type. So you could go ahead and choose whatever you want to type about. Maybe you want to journal what you did on that particular day. I don't know. Just practice something right now in preparation for the test. Okay, so now enough backstory. You want to know, give me the meat and potatoes, how do I do well on this CASPer test? Okay, so, understandable, we talked about there's two different things. There is the video questions, the ethical questions, and then there's the personal questions. So I'm going to go ahead and start this off with my 5 golden rules for each of these different types of questions. Now again, these might work for you, they might not work for you. I found great success in using them. So here they are. Starting with the ethical questions, my 5 golden rules. Number 1. Whenever you get an ethical dilemma, state the dilemma and give both sides of the dilemma. Now when you do this, you're going to go ahead and keep your thoughts organized and also show the evaluator that you know how to take both sides and include everything into your decision process. Now another thing that you're going to do, number 2, is do not harm your employers. let's say you were given an ethical situation where you were on a shift and someone's asking you to do something that would damage the store's reputation or your manager's reputation. You're always going to want to go ahead and find a compromise that stays away from damaging your employers. This is not something desirable as far as schools looking in at the students. Now, number 3 is to always show empathy. I found that this was a very big thing when we're answering the questions on the CASPer test because a lot of times you're going to be in between a rock and a hard place regarding someone asking you for something, and they'll give you a very convincing backstory where you really do want to help them, but in some cases helping them might not be the best thing. Even when helping them is not the best thing, always make sure that you're showing the evaluators that you are empathetic, you do have a heart, and that you would be trying your best to help this person as much as possible within the confines of what the situation has laid out for you. Now, the 4th rule, and this one is actually one of my favorite, it might be the most important of these original 5 golden rules, and this is to always respect the law. Do not do anything illegal when it comes to answering these questions. Now, you probably hear me say this and you're like, Gianluca, there's no brainer, I'm not going to do anything illegal. But you'll be surprised just where the lines get blurred with some of these questions. Now, I can't give too many specific examples as to what I found on my CASPer test. I still remember all of the questions actually, but I will say that sometimes, for example, if a certain authority member in society wants to ask you for something and someone else is telling you not to do it, but the rule that society has established is to go ahead and comply with the authorities, then you might have to go ahead and follow whatever the general law is regarding some of these things, just so that you're not doing anything illegal. Now, the 5th golden rule regarding the CASPer test, and my last one, is to always try and get help from someone else. Now, I found this to be the case in the CASPer test and also in real life. We have to understand that as qualified as we are, being pre-meds, or as qualified as we think we are, we really don't know squat in a lot of different situations, right? We have our own experiences and we're really smart in certain things, but out in some of these scenarios, you might not always be the authority figure there. Always go ahead and try and recruit a manager, someone more senior than you, or always try and work together with someone else in the general environment when you're answering these scenarios, if that's possible. Now let's go ahead and talk about my 5 additional golden rules for the personal reflection type of questions, right? Starting with the very first one, go ahead, start now, well in advance, and prepare some personal examples in your life of times when you've done specific things. Now, this is so important because on the actual day of the test, you're only going to have 5 minutes to answer 3 questions. That's nowhere near as much time as you need to rack your brain and think about everything you've done throughout the course of your entire life. For example, they could go ahead and ask you a question about a time when you failed. And you don't want to go ahead and put a time where you failed and something catastrophic has happened and someone got hurt. You want tactically chosen examples, and real reflection-based examples of times where you've done good things, bad things, could have done something better, and what you've learned from them. And the only way that you're going to be able to have these examples ready on test day is to take a book, like a little notebook, flip book, whatever, and start today. Start thinking, reflecting about your personal life experiences and write them down. Write them down and study them as you approach test day. That way they're fresh in the back of your mind. You can just start banging them out whenever you need them. Now, my next 2 rules are going to be kind of linked together here. Now, so rule number 2 is to go ahead and to not cast blame on others. And then rule number 3 is to state what you've learned from the experience if it's applicable to the question. Now guys, this is so important because as professionals, and that's what you're going to be, take no self-doubt in that. You're going to be a professional when you go ahead and get into these programs. And professionals don't go ahead and start pointing fingers at other people when they do something that's wrong or right. Own up to your mistakes, own up to the things that you did good, and really show how you've taken that experience and applied it to your life to change who you are fundamentally as a person so that you could better respond to these situations in the future. Tip number 4 is to get to the point quickly. Okay, there are so many times where these experiences are such amazing life experiences that we've had, and we want to talk about them and really show the evaluators that we're good people, right? We've been through it and we know what to do in this situation. However, the 5 minutes that you have for 3 questions for that scenario isn't going to allow you the time to do that. know your experiences like the back and front of your hand, and pick and choose the most important things of what happened to you so that you could support your answer as best as you can. Now finally guys, the fifth golden rule of the personal reflection questions is to stay on topic, right? And this is going to go ahead and relate back to the last rule that I just gave, but for staying on topic, if you go ahead and start answering a question and you use your own personal experiences and you start diving too deeply into that personal experience, it's very easy for you to accidentally incorporate something else that you learned from that experience that doesn't relate to the question at all. Now that's fine, I understand that it is something good and amazing that happened to you and it changed the way you think and you want to showcase that. But unfortunately, your score is not going to reflect that. You want to stay on the topic and hopefully get your point across as quickly as possible so that you move on to the next question. Okay, so now that we have the golden rules established for tackling these questions, things that we have to keep in the back of our mind, let's go ahead and talk about how I personally prepared for the CASPer test. Now, feel free to do exactly what I did. Feel free to find your own way. I want to recognize that everyone's going to go ahead and prepare for this test differently. Also, while we're talking about this, I'm going to throw up this disclaimer because I just want to let you guys know I do not work for any of these companies. I'm just going to be talking about things I use. So things like BMO, things like Astroff, right? They have their pros, they have their cons. Find whatever resources work for you. I'm going to try my hardest to link some free resources down below in the description as well, so you could go ahead and check those out first. There's also some free sample questions on the CASPer website themselves, so always go ahead and check those out in advance. Now, I've already gone and said that I personally think you're going to need between 1 month and a month and a half when it comes to preparing for the CASPer test. Now, when I was preparing, within that month and a half, I was doing two different types of preparation. I was doing the passive preparation and then also the active preparation, and I was doing both of these things at the same time. Now, in terms of passive preparation, let's start with that first. One of the things that I did for my passive prep was read. Read things on ethics, watch YouTube videos on the situations, start thinking about some different situations that I might encounter out in the medical field or out in the workforce in general, because anything could come up. It doesn't have to be strictly medically related. Now, another thing that I did was I read this book right here. This is called Doing Right. Now, I think pretty safe to say that most people, when you go and ask them how they prepared for the CASPer test, a lot of them will say that they read this book. I personally thought it was a great book. I got it online at Amazon used, and it already had some highlighted notes, but it didn't really matter to me because I just cared about the information that was inside. Now, is reading that book mandatory? Do you have to read that book to do good on the CASPer test? No. Personally, I think that I still would have done fine without it. However, when it came time for the interviews then, this book was definitely a great help to have with me. I read the book twice, so if you have the time and you want to go ahead and read that book, I say go for it. Personally, I really liked it. Oh, and thank you to Dr. Philip Hebert from the University of Toronto Medical School for writing the book, if you somehow go ahead and get your eyes on this video. Now, in terms of the active preparation that I did in advance for my CASPer test, I would focus on active preparation about 6 days a week at night times. My sleeping schedule was terrible last year because I was doing a thesis project and some other stuff, but basically I would come home after a long day of school, after the gym, and I would do an hour of active preparation at about between 12 and 1 a.m. strictly focused on answering these questions for the CASPer test. So let me just go ahead and read a quick statement from the CASPer website. They say that the general literature suggests that situational judgment tests are relatively immune to test prep, i.e. coaching is unlikely to provide benefit. Now that may actually be what the general literature goes and supports. However, in this case, I respectfully disagree with this statement. I found that personally, the active preparation part of my studying really made a difference, and I was actually able to see noticeable improvement as I kept answering more and more questions, both in the speed of my answers, the actual quality of what I was saying, and how I went about wrapping my head around the ethical situations. I think you need the exposure in order to go ahead and have the actual mindset for answering these questions properly. Now in terms of how I practice myself, if you've seen my CARS video already, I use the same mentality while practicing for CASPer that I also used for the CARS test. And that is this type of model of progressive overload when it comes to answering these types of questions here. In essence, there's basically three things that you're working on here. That is, one, you are going to gradually improve the content of your answers. Number two, you're going to also gradually improve the endurance in terms of answering multiple questions in a row. And then the last thing you're going to do, part three, is increase your timing for each of these passages. You're going to gradually get quicker when it comes to doing all this. And the way that you're going to go ahead and do that, if you want to go ahead and use the method that I did, I really liked it. When we're using this progressive overload, it's very similar to what you would do in the gym if you were trying to get stronger, put on muscle, something like that. And what you do is that you start off with an easy goal. When I first went ahead and started answering these ethical scenarios, I would go ahead and do everything untimed. Normally it's 5 minutes per scenario with the 3 questions, but I would give myself like 7 minutes to start off, 8 minutes, just untimed, but that was around the time that I was doing if I look back retroactively. And I would just try and wrap my head around the situation and answer everything as best as possible. Then when I was comfortable with what I had written, I had gone back and I read through my answers to see how that sounded and whether or not I thought I did a good job in answering the question. Now, once I had gotten comfortable with that, I gradually started getting into the progressive overload. My very first step was to start off with allowing myself 7 minutes per scenario, and then doing only one scenario at a time, but answering all 3 of the questions. Now, once I had finished either the 7 minutes or having answered all 3 of the questions, I would then go back and read through my answers and take notes. Guys, this is so important. Learn from your mistakes, see where you went wrong, and then incorporate different strategies for the next one. Then, once I had gotten comfortable with that step 1, I would then progress down to the next one, which was to decrease the amount of time that I spent on a scenario by 1 minute, increase the amount of passages that I would do by 1 as well, and then also go ahead and still make sure that I was answering all 3 of those questions. So again, for this step, I would do 2 scenarios back to back with no breaks in between, and then I would allow myself 7 minutes per scenario. Now, every time I had gotten comfortable at this level, I would go ahead and bring the time down to 6 minutes and then 5 minutes, and then I actually kept it at 5 minutes. Maybe I brought it down to 4:30 after, and then I gradually increased the amount of passages that I was doing in a row up until about 4 or 5, and then closer to the test, the full 6, right? And I think that this is also very important because we have this type of gratification response. We want to know how we did, but unfortunately that's not going to be possible on the actual test. So delay how long you take to go and look back at your answers by a little bit longer over time, so that on test day that's not distracting you. You cannot be distracted at all because you want to focus on the next passage. If you bomb one of the passages that you're doing in CASPer, that's okay. There's still 11 left and there's 11 different evaluators coming up. Focus on the ones ahead of you and not the ones behind you. Now, one more thing that I want to say when it comes to the timing is that remember, for each scenario, you're going to have 3 different questions. Always make sure that you're answering a little bit for every single one of the questions. I think that sometimes a few of us might fall into the trap of thinking that we have a good flow going for the first question and then we're distracted, we're not keeping our eye on the time. Now, unfortunately, this is going to negatively affect your score, in my opinion, because I think that the evaluators, I can't confirm this, but they're definitely going to be looking at each different question, right? They want to make sure that you have something written in each part and then the scenario as a whole. So always keep that in mind. And if you can, one of the things that I found was really, really great when I was writing the test was trying to read the question, answer, but then be mindful of the next one, right? Because then sometimes if I noticed that my answers were overlapping a little bit, once I thought that I could continue the answer, but it was starting to bleed over into the next question, I would cut myself off and then use what I was going to say next for the next question, and then the next question, and as much time as I had left. Now, everyone, that's pretty much all that I have to say regarding, oh, it's not, there's more. There's more. Finally, one of the things that I am going to be a strong advocate of, and again, you could choose whether or not you want to go ahead and use this, but I personally believe that practice CASPer exams, the full 90-minute exam, are going to be one of your most valuable resources when it comes to getting ready for the CASPer test. Now, you want to go ahead and stagger these out however your schedule demands. Personally, I was doing about 1 a week, and then towards the actual test day, I was doing 2 a week for the final 2 weeks. Now think back to when you were writing the MCAT, or if you had another professional test that you were writing. I think that one of the most important things I did there was the official AAMC practice test. It showed me exactly what the test was going to be like on the actual day, and it helped to reduce my anxiety and just familiarize myself with everything that it was going to be laid out, so just following the formula like that. Now for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and say the practice test that I used, I really liked the Astroff Consulting practice tests for the CASPer. I found that in terms of the question types, they were almost spot on with the ones that I saw on the actual CASPer test, and they were relatively cheap. I think they start off at it's around $25 or $30 Canadian for the test, and then every time you do one they get slightly more expensive as you go through. And you could choose to buy one or two, or as a package. Go ahead and decide what you think you need, but personally I really liked doing practice exams for the CASPer test. Alright everyone, and that's pretty much it. That's everything that I have to say about the CASPer test. At this point, I thought I'd make this video and share it all with you, but I know that tonight I'm going to be lying down and be like, darn it, I should have said that, or maybe I didn't say this. Here's my point. This is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to get a community involved at this channel. I want people commenting. Share your experiences with other applicants and people out there, because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? I'm trying to build everyone up. I'm in medical school right now. I'm living my dream. I hope that some of you could be doing the same in the future. If you think that I missed anything in this video, or if you have your own methods, please go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. I'm sure other people would love to go ahead and see what's working for other people as well. And that way we could always go ahead and keep this video up and have people reference it in the future. Right? We'll see if the test changes or if new things come out. We'll keep it as current as possible, and I'll act as a moderator and whatever else we need to do. Now, one final note about myself, everyone. The vlogs are coming, I promise. As soon as medical school goes ahead and gets started, I'm going to try and go ahead and do some sort of vlog so everyone can see just what it's like to be a medical student. You know, full disclosure, I'm not there yet, but I have a feeling that it's going to be a fantastic journey, and I cannot wait to share it with everyone. If you thought this video was helpful, go ahead and hit that like button below. It goes and it shows me that these videos actually are reaching some people, and I am making a little bit of a difference, okay? Other than that, I hope everyone's having a great day wherever you are. And if you're not, let me know about it. I'd love to help. Take it easy, everyone.